There are literally hundreds of maths-based Excel functions you can use in formulas, but I believe there's only 4 essentials and I'm going through them in this video now. Hi, I'm John, a qualified accountant with 25 years real-world Excel experience, and during that time I've literally designed, built and used thousands of spreadsheets, and I think you only need 33 functions to build 99% of everything you ever want to do. And in this video I'm going to talk through the 4 essential maths-based functions that I think you need to learn in order to do pretty much anything. First one is the sum function, and I know you know the sum function, right? This video is about some of my top tips on these functions rather than exactly how you use them. And I just want to chuck in there that I'm cheating ever so slightly when I say 4 essential functions, because some of these functions, and sum is one of them, they have family members that work in exactly the same way. And by that, what I mean is you can have the identical formula and you can swap the word sum for, in this case, min, max, average, count, count A, plus a few others less essential, and it'll do pretty much exactly what you would expect it to do. So my first tip is the alt equals function key, which hopefully you may already know, but you hit alt equals, and as long as you're next to a column of numbers or under it or whatever, it will have a guess at what you want to sum, fill in the formula, you just hit enter. And the great little thing about this as well is that once you've got that, it's actually a shortcut, because you can hit F2 to go in, hit home, and then you can use it, change it to count, for example, and it then ends up being a shortcut to get to pretty much anything else, especially if you've got like very long columns of numbers. Talking of long columns of numbers, my second tip is to keep your totals at the top. And by totals I mean any kind of aggregations, because as you scroll down this long list here, for example, I mean it's not even that long, but it takes a while. If I put that total at the bottom, the moment I start scrolling up, it's going to disappear from view. Whereas if going back down, and I'll just delete that, if I put that total up here instead, then it's going to appear no matter what. If I've got new data coming in, I can just change that number there, maybe add a 0 on the end, give me an order of magnitude of sort of room for expansion. Any new numbers going on the bottom here, I'm just going to automatically add to the top. I do not need to insert rows to accommodate new data. I just plonk it on the bottom, so I could just do this, for example, and these totals are going to expand accordingly. The other thing that some people don't realise about the sum formula is that you can use multiple criteria. You don't just need one range. So if I, again, alt equals and add up, say that, I can put a comma and then I can add up as well other numbers or even individual cells, any kind of ranges, as long as it's separated by a comma. Can hit enter, it will add it all up. Now I wouldn't actually recommend that technique other than quickly working something out. Probably a bit hard for users to follow, but it's something a lot of people don't realise the sum formula, and of course all the family functions can do. Just a slight kind of warning as well with the sum formula is that it will always add up what is on your screen, even if you hide it. So you can see this total here is coming out at 22,000, but if I hide like a massive chunk of the numbers there, it still says 22,000. So it's just something to be careful of, especially if you print things or you maybe copy and paste them onto PowerPoint, things like that as pictures. And it brings me very nicely onto the solution to that, which is my second essential function, and that is subtotal. The key use for subtotal, rather than say a sum or a count or something, is that it does ignore the hidden stuff. There's just some really important point that you need to watch out for, and I'll demonstrate it here. So let's just say I want to get the subtotal of this order value column here, right? So as I start typing, I get my list, and using the arrow keys I can select it and hit tab. And I'll get, this nice list of sort of tips here. It says, oh, look at these function numbers that you can have, average, count, min, max. and sum being number 9. And if I scroll down, I appear to get like the same list again. Somewhat confusing, what's the difference? Well, it's a very important difference actually, and that is that the numbers below 100 will take account of any kind of filtered out data, right? So if I put 9, for example, it would sum up anything that wasn't filtered out. Whereas 109 would also filter out anything I hide. So let's just demo this, right? So subtotal 9, and I'll add up this column here, right? And hit enter. So you can see, as expected, I get the same total as the sum, right? Say I now say, well, actually, I'm just going to hide this product here, right? Now, that number doesn't change. Whereas if I change that to a 109, you can see it's now different to the sum. So that's absolutely key. Now, when you start filtering things, so say we just pick furniture, for example, we're going to get the correct value there. And also if we hide something manually, we're going to get the reduced number 2. So very, very useful to use the numbers above 100 unless you've got a definite reason why you would want to add up manually hidden stuff differently. And of course, the great thing about this is that you can now, if you use it in conjunction with the sum, which will show everything regardless of whether it's hidden or not, and then the subtotal, you can get a direct comparison there, and you can, obviously divide one by the other, for example, and extract some kind of percentage there. The other thing is that when your data is in that filtered mode and you hit the shortcut key Alt equals, it automatically assumes you want a subtotal, which is very, very useful indeed. And you've just got to watch out though, because the data is filtered, that say I highlight that whole column there, you can see it finishes at row 4998 because that's the last of the filtered rows available. But actually this table of data finished at row 507. So you just got to be a little bit careful if you're doing that. And I would always advise using Excel tables, which I'll come on to in a second. Incidentally, all these functions are part of my 33 fantastic functions for Excel cheat sheet. I honestly think these are the only functions you need to build 99% of all the spreadsheets you're ever going to need. So get your hands on that. It's a download link in the description. Right, moving on to some really powerful stuff now, and that is the SUMIFs formula. What does it do? Okay, well, it basically will sum a column of numbers based off of like multiple criteria, and it's very flexible with the criteria too. So the original SUMIF formula, which is a sort of legacy one, you could say, I want to sum this column of numbers, but only if they're greater than 0 or greater than 1,000 or something like that. Whereas now with SUMIFs, not only can you can still do that, but you can also say, I want to tick this column. So for example, I want to pick up the order values where a different column equals something else. So let me demonstrate. So if I'm going to pick furniture, so say I want to sum up the order values where the product category equals furniture. So kind of the equivalent of filtering the data to furniture, but with the added bonus that the number's not going to change if I change the filters and things like that. So let's start with SUMIFs. And first off, it says what's my sum range, which just means that, where are all my numbers really. So that's here, okay? And then it's kind of where's my criteria 1, it's called. So criteria range 1 is my product category. So make sure I highlight the entire column there the same. And then my actual criteria as I set is furniture. So in other words, I'm saying where this column range equals this value, furniture. And there's my 300,000, which is the sum of all the furniture order values. Okay. But there is a top time saving tip on all of that, and that is to turn this into a table, which is Control T. Now I've got it the formatting set up and that, so you might have to play around with defaults yourself, but essentially now that's a table. If I delete that formula, I'll do the whole thing again. So this time I'm going to say SUMIFs, and as long as I'm in that order value column, control space, it will give you, it will tell me, I want table 2 order value column. And the bonus of that, of course, is that one, you can, well, several bonuses, but one is you can read it like a normal English language, but also if any extra data comes on, it's going to pick it up. Next is the product category, which is that, and I say I want it to equal that. Now there's no sort of, that's not in a table, so it's not coming up with just still E4. Right, there's my number. But of course there's way more to it than this, because if I want to add in multiple criteria, I can. So what about not just furniture? I want to know if just the subcategory of chairs and chair mats from furniture, and I also want to know, for example, whether any loss-making totals are. So what's the total losses from this area? SUMIFs. So the sum range now is the profit. The product category I'm going to pick up, it needs to equal furniture. And now I can add in extra ranges. The product subcategory equals chairs and chair mats. And the profit and loss column equals loss. So I've got like multiple criteria in there now, and there we go. And the other thing people don't necessarily realize you can do with the SUMIFs function, and of course I should say all of this applies to these family functions as well, the minifs, maxifs, etc. All of them you can put in text-based criteria. So if you want to know how many, what's the total order costs that have been greater than 1,000, for example, I can put in SUMIFs, and let's just do one of the other ones. That's just how many orders, so countifs, and the criteria range is going to be the order cost, and if my criteria, this time I just have to put it in quotes, so I can put greater than 1,000, like that. And I just need to put it in these quotation marks for it to work. I hit that and it says there's 150 of them. And you can get quite clever with this, because I could also add further criteria, for example. So if I wanted between 1,000 and 2,000, I could put another criteria saying that it equals that. And this time I want it less than 2,000. And it just so happens I might have to put like 1,200 or something on here, and there's 87. So you can even sort of get in between two numbers using these sorts of functions. So very, very powerful function, the SUMIFs, and once you know it, you basically know the minifs, maxifs, averageifs and countifs functions too. So very, very useful, very, very powerful function in building spreadsheets. And the last of the 4 essential maths functions for Excel is round. And of course its family members, round up and round down, which do exactly what you might expect. So round basically knocks decimals off of numbers. But what a lot of people don't realise it can do is round down to the nearest, say, 100 or 1,000 or anything else, because you're allowed to put negative numbers into the rounding function. So for example, a typical round you might say is, I want to round this to no decimal places, so 0 decimal places. And there you go, you can see that's essentially knocked the decimal places off. But if I put minus 2, for example, minus 2, it actually rounds to the nearest 100. So what's that all about? Well, I always think of it as kind of like the position of the decimal place. So minus 2 means you move your decimal place like 2 places to the left, essentially. Plus 2 would obviously give me 2 places to the right, and you can see that. But minus 2, 2 places to the left. And 3 would be round to the nearest 1,000. The other thing that, again, people don't necessarily realise that you can do is you can start rounding to, like, say, the nearest 50. Right? Because this is to the nearest 100, but if I With a small addition here, if I times the number by 2 before I round it, like that, so I've essentially doubled it and rounded it, then divide the whole answer back by 2, I've essentially done a kind of rounding to the nearest 50, which is something that you might not expect that you'd be able to do. And I always think of like, the way to work it out is that this number at the end is essentially your kind of fraction. So the whole thing is like, if you think of it as like half, because it's 1 over 2. If I wanted like quarters, divide it both by 4, that would essentially round to quarter of whatever this represents. So minus 2 represents nearest 100, so quarter of 100, so it's now the nearest 25. And so there you go, you're seeing we're getting 875, 1125, etc. And it's probably best demonstrated if you say you want no decimal places, because then you'll get everything either no decimal places, or you'll get your 0.25s, your 0.75s, and your 0.5s, etc. So that's another thing that a lot of people don't realise about the round formula. Remember that all of these functions are on my 33 fantastic functions for Excel, the only functions I believe you need to build 99% of all spreadsheets in Excel. Links in the description if you want to download this. There's some typical use cases, a load of tips and stuff around, and as if that wasn't enough, there's also a library of every single Excel function on the planet with a little description of what it does in case you have one of these niche applications and you need to find a perfect function as well. If you think I've missed essential Excel functions out, there's always the comment section. I love having a big debate about this. I honestly think you don't need any others, but I'm open to challenge. So get commenting if you think differently to me. Either way though, hope that saves you a load of time and effort, and I will see you in the next video shortly.